The maid accidentally burned the fiancée's dress. So the fiancée tried to burn her hand, until the billionaire walked in. The kitchen went silent except for the hiss of the stove. Sarah's fingers were wrapped so tight around Grace's wrist that her knuckles had turned white. "You ruined my wedding dress," Sarah whispered. "Now you'll know how it feels to burn." Grace didn't fight. She didn't scream. She just closed her eyes. The flame was inches from her skin when the kitchen door swung open. "Sarah! Let go of her. Now!" Henry Whitfield stood in the doorway, his voice low and shaking with something none of the staff had ever heard from him before. No one moved. No one breathed. But what Henry said next would change everything in that house forever. Grace Miller had worked at the Whitfield estate for almost 3 years. She wasn't just a maid. She was the first face the household saw every morning, and often the last one they said goodnight to. She lived in a small apartment across town with her 11-year-old daughter, Lily, who had asthma bad enough that some nights Grace stayed awake just listening to her breathe. The job paid well. It had to. Between the medicine and the rent, there wasn't much room for anything else. Henry Whitfield had inherited his family's construction empire at 29, but he never acted like it. He remembered the names of every person who worked for him. He remembered their birthdays. He remembered Lily's, too, and every year a small gift showed up with her name on it. Grace never asked for that kindness. She just noticed it, quietly, the way she noticed everything. 6 months ago, Henry got engaged to Sarah Reynolds, a woman from a wealthy family 2 towns over. She was polished. She was beautiful. And from the very first day, she made it clear the staff existed to serve her, not to be spoken to. Grace kept her head down. She always did. The wedding was 3 weeks away. The dress, ivory silk, hand-stitched, flown in from a designer in New York, hung in a garment bag in the East Wing, untouched, waiting. Grace had been asked to steam it before the final fitting. She had done this 100 times for 100 garments. She had no idea this one dress was about to change her life. The steamer had worked fine all morning. But halfway through smoothing the hem, it sputtered, hissed, and a small scorch mark appeared along the bottom seam, no bigger than a coin. Grace's stomach dropped. She reached for a cloth immediately, dabbing at it, praying it would fade. It didn't. She heard heels on the marble floor before she could even call for help. Sarah stopped in the doorway. She stared at the dress. Then she stared at Grace. "What," she said slowly, "did you do?" "It was an accident. The steamer malfunctioned, Do you know what this dress cost?" Grace didn't answer. There was no answer that would help. What Sarah did next, nobody expected, not even the housekeeper standing frozen by the hallway. Sarah grabbed Grace by the wrist and pulled her toward the kitchen, her voice rising with every step. "You'll learn what it feels like," she hissed, "to destroy something that isn't yours." In the hallway, a small girl watched everything from behind a doorframe. It was Henry's 10-year-old niece, Emma, who was staying at the estate for the summer. She didn't understand all of it. But she understood enough to know something was very wrong. She turned and ran, not away from the house, but toward the front door, where she'd just seen Henry's car pull in. Nobody noticed her leave. Nobody knew what she was about to do. In the kitchen, Sarah turned the stove burner on. "Please," Grace said, her voice breaking. "My daughter needs me. Please don't do this." "You should have thought of that," Sarah snapped, "before you ruined everything I've worked for." The housekeeper, Diane, stood in the doorway too afraid to intervene, too afraid of losing her own job to say a single word. Sarah pulled Grace's hand toward the flame. That's when the door burst open. Henry stood there, out of breath, Emma right behind him, tears streaming down her face. "She's hurting Miss Grace." Emma cried. "She grabbed her. I saw it." Henry's eyes moved from his niece, to Grace's trembling hand, to the stove still lit, to Sarah's face, and something in his expression changed completely. "Sarah, let go of her. Now." Sarah released Grace's wrist like it had burned her instead. Henry, it's not what it looks like. She ruined my dress, I heard what she said, Emma interrupted. You said you'd make her know how it feels to burn. The room went completely silent. Henry looked at the dress hanging nearby, at the small scorch mark on the hem, and then at Grace, who was cradling her wrist like she still couldn't believe she was safe. Nobody in that kitchen knew what Henry was about to say next. But it would end one engagement, and begin something none of them expected. Henry walked past Sarah without a word and knelt beside Grace. Are you hurt? He asked gently. I'm okay, Grace whispered. I'm so sorry about the dress. Don't, Henry said. Don't you dare apologize. He stood and faced Sarah. 3 weeks ago, Diane told me she saw you scream at one of the gardeners over a bent flower. 2 weeks ago, our driver said you threw his radio out the car window because the station was too cheap for you. I told myself I was imagining things. I told myself you were just stressed about the wedding. Sarah's face went pale. But this, Henry continued, nodding toward the stove, this isn't stress. This is who you are when you think no one important is watching. Henry, please, let's talk about this privately. Emma is 10 years old, he said, his voice cracking now. She ran through this house to find me because she was scared for Grace. A 10-year-old had more courage today than every adult in this kitchen combined. Sarah opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Henry turned to Grace, his voice softening completely. Grace, I'm so sorry. This should have never happened in my home. Grace shook her head, tears finally falling. I just didn't want to lose my job. My daughter needs her medicine, I couldn't. You're not losing anything, Henry said. Except maybe your job as a maid. Grace blinked, confused, until Henry knelt down again, this time in front of Emma. Thank you, he told his niece, for being braver than all of us. Then he turned back toward Grace, and what he said next would give this story its true ending. Grace, Henry said, I've watched you work in this house for 3 years. You've never once complained. You've never once asked for more than what's fair. And today, you tried to protect my niece's view of this family by staying quiet about something that should never have been kept quiet. He paused. I'd like you to run the estate's household staff. Full salary increase. Full medical coverage, for you and for Lily. Grace stared at him, unable to speak. That's not charity, Henry added gently, as if he could read her mind. That's respect. Long overdue. Sarah tried one more time. Henry, you're overreacting because of one small argument. There won't be a wedding, Sarah, Henry said quietly. I think you already know that. She didn't argue after that. She simply gathered her things and left, and the house felt lighter the moment the front door closed behind her. 3 months later, Grace stood in that same kitchen, not steaming a wedding dress, but teaching Emma how to bake her grandmother's biscuit recipe, flour dusted across both their hands, laughter filling a room that once held so much fear. Lily's asthma treatments were fully covered now. She hadn't missed a single day of school that semester. Henry never talked about Sarah again. But he talked often about the courage of a little girl who ran to get help instead of staying silent, and about a woman who endured unfair treatment with more grace than anyone in that house deserved from her. Grace still calls it an accident that changed her life, not the burn on the dress, but the moment someone finally saw her, truly saw her, and decided she was worth protecting. Because sometimes the smallest scorch mark on a piece of silk can reveal the truth about someone's heart, and sometimes, the bravest person in the room is the one nobody expected to speak up at all. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who still believes kindness can change the world. We'd love to hear your thoughts, so leave a comment below.